Hello, John. You're up first.
Hey Bart, how are you?
How is it going, John? John, where are you playing out of?
Grayton Casino in Santa Rosa
Oh,
area.
that's right. Great. And John has called into the show before. I think we do have actually two or three people that actually are first time callers, but John always sends in good hands. So he's on the show quite a bit. I've played at Grayton many times, and I've talked to many new people that have come onto the site today from the Bay Area. It's a nice place. When I went up there, Sonoma County, and this is 2.5. Is that right?
3-5 actually.
3.51K cap. Is that right?
1,500 cap.
Oh, nice. All right. So how deep are you for this hand?
So I'm the effective stack at 1,100.
All right. So 1,100 effective. 3.5 Grayton, which is in, like I said, just north of San Francisco. Okay.
And so I'm in the cutoff with Jack of Diamonds, 10 of Diamonds.
Hero in the cutoff. Jack of Diamonds, 10 of Diamonds. Okay.
And I think we were nine-handed here. The nine-handed's full.
Okay.
And so it folds around to me in the cutoff, and I opened at 20.
So it folds to the hero in the cutoff, and hero opens to 20. Okay.
And the button calls, the small blind calls, and the big blind calls.
Small blind, button, button, small blind, and big blind call against a weight position open, right? I mean, this is what a typical live poker, right? Because it's two blinds. So you're not that incentivized to always drive everybody out, but I mean, how often are you really flatting button versus cutoff? I suppose it's okay sometimes within a two blind format, but then, if you're in the small blind, now you're even more incentivized to squeeze. This is just typical live poker. I don't know when this setup would ever really be proper in theory. Cutoff open, button call. I mean, especially at these stacked ups. But anyways, 20, 40, 60, 80, right? Something like that. Yeah. Okay.
Minus the drop, so
Yeah,
more like
maybe 75. So Jack 10 of diamonds from the cutoff, three people call. Okay.
flop is 9 of hearts, 8 of diamonds, deuce of diamonds.
Wow. 9 of hearts, 8 of diamonds, deuce of diamonds. So you flop the world here, right?
Yeah.
So you got the flush draw, open-ended straight draw, 15 out draw, top pair dynamic board, like I like to call that, where, if somebody hasn't flopped a set here, I mean, there's obviously there's 1-2 pair that could be viable in the form of 9-8. But if someone hasn't flopped a set here and they were going to 3-bet off 10s plus, the best of their hand they're going to have is a 9. And it's hard for a 9 to call down a lot of times inherently as overcards come out. So this is a pretty good spot for you, to the point where I usually don't c-bet. I don't even know if you would call this a c-bet bluff. I was going to say, I don't normally c-bet bluff into three people. This is almost more of like it's a bluff, but it's almost like value. I mean, you're getting like multiple things accomplished here if you bet. And that's actually one of the minor small stakes exploits. I was looking through the whole list the other day. One of the small stakes exploits is actually betting, I think, a higher concentration of draws on the flop, no matter what the sort of texture is. I mean, you got good things going on here anyways. So I would be doing a lot of betting if it does get checked to you.
Yep. So it does get checked to me, and I bet 50.
All right, so the blinds check. And hero bets 50. By the way, just something that just popped out at me here, John, too. In a different configuration, meaning like if there were more people behind you, as opposed to, because remember, the blinds have just checked you, right? So you only got one guy behind you. If you were in a situation where maybe you had opened early and then three people in the field had called, you actually might check raise this hand for max fold equity. We've talked about sometimes check raising as the pre-flop raiser. I wouldn't do that here because I just think the button's going to check through so much. I mean, you get two guys naturally checking to the, sort of undefined hands out of the blind. So if you don't get a bet in now, I think you might lose a little bit of credibility later on.
Yeah, totally agree.
So you bet 50, okay. Mm-hmm.
I bet 50, the button folds, the small blind calls.
Okay.
And then the big blind raises to 150.
That's interesting. That's a really small raise, huh?
Yep.
That is a really, really small raise. So you go 50, the button folds, small blind calls, and the big blind raises to 150. This is kind of one of these ones where I'm a little troubled here, meaning like I feel like if he had a draw and he was doing this, it would be larger. And the board is draw heavy. It kind of seems like it's a lot of thick value, like almost like a set. I mean, that's a pretty. I mean, it's kind of even rare to have a guy like do this with just 9-8. They would almost want to do this, to protect more. And it would be a much easier situation here for you, John, if you were just heads up, because if you bet 50, let's say the small blind folded out too, and then this guy check raised to 150. I think you would just have an easy call. Now, people might reflex, be like, oh, 3-bet. The problem with 3-betting, I'm talking about if you were heads up, is if the guy's range of check raising is a set, it's just a spew to 3-bet. That would be a lot easier because you wouldn't have to worry about possibly some of your draws, which are not the nut draws besides the straight draw, being good. And I wonder here, because if the small blind's in there, does that possibly make you think about trying to drive the small blind out of the hand? The only problem though, John, is and I'm not saying that you're going to do that. I'm just saying, kind of talking through it. If you do that and the big blind is like really strong here, he's just going to jam it in your face. And okay. Yeah. I mean, hey, against the set, you're 60-40. So if you want to make the case that the value here or the best play is to get the small blind out, and then maybe the big blind only like 3-bet jams on you like only 70% of the time. And then when he does, like you're 60-40, I guess somebody could make that argument, but it's a little bit tricky with the small blind in there.
Yeah, I all the things that you said are exactly what I was thinking as well. This villain, the big blind, I do consider to be a very solid player. I don't think he's making some bizarre move with that small raise size. I thought it was entirely thick value. I thought he was 8-9 minimum and more likely a set. So I was very concerned and did think that if I raised, he would just shove over the top of me and really put me in an unhappy position. Although, as you said, I do have equity, a lot of equity.
So I'll read one of these comments here. Glitch47 says Bart gives players way too much credit to be able to think through their sizings. His size doesn't matter much here. The fact that he raised mattered. He can probably just have 9x LOL. Yeah, I don't buy that, Glitch47. Like it went back call. Like some guy with like Jack 9 is not just 3xing here, like in a single raise pot. Now, could a guy have like 9x of diamonds here? Like ace 9 of diamonds, king 9 of diamonds, maybe something like that, I suppose. Of course, he's behind to that anyways. But were you concerned about the small blind being in there though, John?
I was for exactly the reasons that you said, that I was, worried that if I just call, it encourages him to come in and he might, have some of my outs. So
yeah.
But nevertheless,
sounds to me like you called, right?
I did call.
All right. So what did the small blind do?
Unfortunately, he called also.
Yeah, I mean, and the reason why that's troubling even more so is because when you take a look at like what the small blind calls your bet with, like say you're small, before we get to the check raise, before the fact the big blind check raises, you bet and the small blind called. What's that range? Well, I mean, the small blind could have a 9. Small blind might even have an 8, right? Small blind could also have draws. The troubling part of this is that once he calls and then the guy to his left check raises and then you call, a lot of that 9x and 8x just fold out now, right? Unless the guy's a huge drooler. And now it leans him towards some of those draws. And then you wonder now, like if a diamond comes, are you good?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, what are you going to do though? You can't fold. And it's like, you don't want to 3-bet. So it's kind of like, well, you call and then you hope the small blind folds out. Now that he doesn't, you might just use that information, playing the hand onward. I mean, you guys put in 450 here on the flop. So now it's 525 and you guys have like maybe 900 to 950, something like that, moving the turn.
Right.
Okay. All right. What's the turn here?
The turn is the Jack of clubs.
Okay. So now you turn top pair. It doesn't really do anything in terms of, the only thing that this does is it will give you more equity against 9-8, which I doubt that this guy has. But then it actually puts you ahead of the higher draws that are not paired. Like if somebody had king, queen of diamonds, You were behind that, right? Now you're ahead of that. But again, you're against two people though. So that's an interesting turn card.
So the small blind checks and the big blind bets 400.
So the big blind bet's 400. Again, wow, this is really interesting. So you start this street with 900 to 950. The big blind bet's 400. So the pot's 925 and it's 400 for you to call. Again, I go back to like, if the small blind was not in the hand, then this would just be a call all day long, 100% call, right? There would be absolutely no reason to ever raise. It would be a pure spew, especially when your equity actually goes down against a set here on the turn, in the sense that your equity goes down, like you take away one of his like board pairing outs because you have a jack, but it doesn't do anything for your hand, right? Jack 10 on a jack turn against like a set of eights or a set of deuces. The problem though is that if you are up against a better made hand and then someone has you dominated on the draw side, you have very little equity here.
Yep.
I remember that's one of the first tweets I put out. Like, if you're in a three-way pot and somebody has a better made hand than you and your draw is dominated, it's a recipe for 0% equity. Now, you probably don't have 0% because of your straight draw, but oh man, I mean, it's one of these things where, God, you're so handcuffed here. You're really handcuffed here because if you call, the pot's going to be 1325. So if the guy has a higher diamond draw than you, then you just, he's always going to overcall. But at the same time, I don't think possibly raising to drive the small blind out is that good of a play, because now that you've burned a card, you are only probably like 25% now against a set. When you have a 15 out draw, it goes from like 60-40 on the flop to a brick on the turn. You're like 25%. You might be a little bit more than that, like I said, because of the jack, because he's got less outs to pair the jack. And I wonder if you could call here, and then if the small blind calls behind, I'm thinking through this. Like, I don't think that raising can be correct though when you're ahead, when you're just behind by like 27% against this guy's range. I mean, maybe I am like giving that guy too much credit, always having a set or something like that. But if you call and then the small blind overcalls, you can still make a straight. And then if the small blind overcalls, you'll have like 500 left. If you call, the pot will be 1725, and you only have 500 left. Because I was wondering if the river was a diamond and the small blind like jammed the river, could you fold? But God, you only have 500 left. It's really interesting because it's like, yeah, you're only 27, 28% against a set, so you don't want to put the extra 500 in, but at the same time, you might only have like 5 to 10% equity or 10 to 15% equity if the other guy stays in. So if you drive the other guy out, your equity goes up for the entire pot. So it's very, very tricky and very, very bizarre. I still kind of think I might want to call. I mean, I would almost have to I don't know if I've ever thought about a hand in this way actually before, because there's already 900 in the pot. So he bets 4 into 525, so there's already 900. If you put in 900 to basically, like, I guess you could say 900 to win the 900, but then it drives your equity up. It's not really 900 to win 900 because you're going to get money from the other guy, but it's an extra 500 on the side. It's basically like you're getting 2.5 to 1 on 400, and then you're giving yourself 1 to 1 on 500. This is why it's so complex. But the problem is that you're always going to be behind, right, to the guy who's leading this action, but then you can increase your equity if you drive the other guy out. Wow, it's a really weird spot. What did you do, by the way?
I mean, you were going through exactly the thoughts that I was having, and I was very, very that was I hated the idea of calling, letting in the other guy drawing, and especially if he had a bigger diamond. But even that with the jack now, a random 10, like if he had, I don't know, 10-8 of hearts or something like that. Now I'm chopping with him, so I have less equity even if I hit my hand
You mean you're talking about that from the small blind, you mean?
from the small blind.
Yeah, but is he ever overcalling a check raise with 10-8 of hearts, though?
So he was relatively loose. I don't know if he was that loose, but yeah, either way, I hated the idea of actually making my hand and losing to him. So I decided to jam to effectively just get him out of the hand, knowing that I was behind the main villain, the big blind.
I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Like I said, like I've been doing this show for 7 years. I don't know what the answer to this from a mathematical perspective. Like I would actually have to think about this one because again, it's a situation where you could do it out mathematically, right? Let's just do it. I mean, maybe I'll slot something in. Like if you slot in a set for the big blind and then you slot in like say king queen of diamonds or the nut flush draw for the small blind, how is this hand played? What is the most profitable way to play this hand? Assuming that if you call, the small blind will call behind you. But if you jam, the small blind will fold behind you. What is the most profitable way to play this hand? I still don't think it could be full because your equity goes up. But remember, you're only putting in the 500 to get the other guy out. I don't know what the answer is. I as a gut reaction, I still don't think that jamming would be correct though. But anyways, okay, you jam. Does that get the small blind out?
It did. It did.
All right.
And yeah, the big blind calls. He has a set of nines.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I think that's so small blind folds and big blind calls. And again, that's really what we thought. Set of nines, so you're like 26, 27%, something like that. Yeah. And then do you hit?
Unfortunately, I bricked.
And then a brick at the end.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it turns out it was so I think for what you described, it probably was a bad shove regardless. But it turns out it was even worse because the small blind said he had a smaller flush draw.
He had a smaller flush draw. I mean, I kind of washed over the fact. I mean, it seems insane to me. I kind of washed over the fact that is this just a fold on the turn, which just seems absolutely insane. It's just one of these spots where, again, like even if let's just say what the players had, because I still don't know the answer. Like if you say what the players had in the sense of, okay, the big blind has 9-9. The other guy's got like ace-3 of diamonds. How do we play this spot? If jamming will fold out ace-3 of diamonds, but calling will bring in ace-3 of diamonds. Is it a fold? Is it a jam? Because you still have 27% equity, but the thing is that you're only getting 2.5 to 1 before you jam. So that's the problem, right? So maybe you have like the correct equity, right? Because you're getting 2.5 to 1 before you jam, like if you were to just call the 400. But the problem is that extra 500, you're not getting 2.5 to 1 on, you're getting 1 to 1 on. So if your equity even heads up is 27%, maybe it is a fold. It's a really, really crazy spot, but thank you very much for the call. I appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks.